strategic redeployment that set a date. We still believe in that. Obviously, we had said get out by the end of 2007. Can't be a little hard now logistically, but the fact of the matter is what we did is once Iraq had an election, we said it's time for us to set a date. Now, everybody beat us up when we called strategic redeployment. They called it cut and run and retreat and all that. I had to remind them those were the words Reagan used when we left Lebanon. Then, of course, a lot of the people backed off a little bit. Now, let me begin before I get to the specifics here. This is not a good policy that failed. This is a bad policy, okay? Strategically, it was bad. Yes, we've made a lot of tactical mistakes, but you didn't need to go, you shouldn't have gone, and your objectives you could never achieve. And I think that's very, very, very critical. Now, the next thing, too, is we've got to stop listening to those people who've been wrong all along. I mean, you know, yesterday on television, Carl Levin was talking about the fact, quoting from Reagan, good progress, significant progress, you know, year after year after year. And, you know, yesterday watching some of the talk shows, the people who like the surge say, well, up until this time, things were going bad. They never told us that, okay, you know, before, you know, Petraeus came along and we started the surge strategy. My favorite is now it's all Al-Qaeda, okay? It's not, forget it's a civil war. As Carlos said, it's now Al-Qaeda. Yes, they call themselves Al-Qaeda. I grew up in the Bronx. We called our Little League team the Yankees, okay? You can do that, but, I mean, there's no connection between the two, okay? They don't take orders, and I think that's, you know, very, very, very critical. Similarly, everybody's talking about Al Anbar. Gee, the surge did it. No, it was actually starting to turn, as Mike pointed out. 9 months ago, things were starting to turn. And why was it turning? Because after the election here, the Sunnis there knew we were going to leave. And once it was clear we were going to leave, then they were willing to turn on Al-Qaeda. Now, we do not need any more halfway measures. We, the United States, needs to take control of our own security. And the way to do that basically is to set a date, we argue, within 12 months to get out. Okay, once you start. General Odinero said it would take 10 to 12 months to get out. Okay, 12 months. You can look at how we did it in Vietnam, roughly about 10,000 people a month. You stay in the region. That's why we call it redeployment. Okay, you're not leaving the region. You can have forces in Kuwait. You can have offshore balancing with your carrier battle group and your Marine Expeditionary Force. You've got bases in Bahrain and Qatar. So it's not like you're leaving the region. You're leaving Iraq. Now, if you set a date and you announce no permanent bases, what does that do? First of all, it puts the Iraqis on notice. Now, I don't know if they're ever going to get their act together, you know, with this government, but that's the only way is to concentrate. When I was over there in April, they kept saying, you guys aren't going to leave. Bush said this is the central front of the war on terror. Well, you need to tell them, no, we are going to leave, and here's the date by which we're going to get out. Now, when we do that, it's their problem as well as the countries in the region. And as Carlos pointed out with the refugees and all of the other problems, they're going to want to work with us, and Brian will get into the specifics there, but it's their problem. They've got to know if they don't get involved constructively, they're going to have to live with the consequences. The next thing is you're going to save our Army. Our Army's in terrible shape, okay? And, you know, it's interesting. They were talking yesterday when Jim Webb and, Graham got into the argument. By the way, I have to admire Senator Webb. I'd have leapt out of the chair yesterday with the way Graham kept interrupting him. But the fact of the matter is, they said, well, the Army loves it. They're all re-enlisting. One of the things is the Army is letting you re-enlist. They're violating their own policies. It used to be you had to have a year or less to re-enlist. They're letting them 3-4 years, you know, be able to do it. That doesn't mean they support the policy. They support their fellow men and women, with them. But look at the recruiting for the Army, okay? Over 1,000 felons came in last year in order for the Army to meet its total. We need to send more troops to Afghanistan, which, by the way, is the central front in the war on terror. And if you set a date, we then have control over our own destiny. What I really worry about is somebody kills the Ayatollah Sistani, and they've come close here. They kill one of his top people, and there's no holding the Shias back. Then you really are going to have to get American troops out quickly. Or they shell the Green Zone and kill several hundred people, and then the Congress, then the American people demand that we get out more quickly. And the second part of our plan is stop the unconditional training of the Iraqi forces. Okay? Carlos mentioned, who are you training? Okay? Who are you training? It would be like saying we're going to train the Bosnian, Serbs to take care of, things when we leave. They are not loyal to their government. They've had enough training. They have more training than a lot of the young men and young women we're sending over there. We're sending kids right out basic training over there. It's motivation. Okay, and I hear, well, they're doing better. Yeah, we had a battle in Bakuba. We asked for 11,500 Iraqis. 1,000 showed up. And then, of course, this weekend, our troops were fighting Iraqi police. These people are loyal to their own tribe or their own sect, so we've got to stop this unconditional training. What I worry about, too, is they might turn on us when we end up leaving. Now, let me conclude with this. A lot of people are going to say, well, what about your moral obligation to the Iraqis? Yes, we do. We leave within a year. We've been there more than 5 years. But what about our moral obligation to those kids we're sending over there time after time without, and I can't believe that, the Senate would not have allowed a vote to allow somebody who's been there for a year to stay home a year before you go back? What are we doing to these people? So yes, we have a moral obligation, but we also have a moral obligation to the men and women who volunteer to serve this country. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Larry. I'm Brian Katulis. I'm with the Center for American Progress. I've had the honor of working with Larry on the original strategic redeployment plan, which we put out in September of 2005, about 15 months before the Iraq Study Group. And I think many of you are familiar with a lot of the details because a lot of what we had proposed back then had become what is the alternative, I think, that a lot of people here on Capitol Hill have been pushing, and we're really proud of that. Through the last year or so, we have been dedicated to making sure that our analysis is reflecting the reality inside of Iraq. And if I have one message today, it is that we need to get ahead of the curve rather than stay behind the curve in the policy solutions that we're proposing. And I think Larry touched upon it. My goal here is to get you to at least look at our strategic reset plan, which we put out at the end of June. We called it strategic reset for many different things. We were wrestling. One night I was working, we were doing interviews and research, and my computer froze up. And I said, oh my gosh, this is like Iraq and the Middle East. We need to hit Control, Alt, Delete because the situation has become so complex, so many factors intertwined that we can't simply focus on tactical shifts and small solutions, that we need a major shift. And we think that we've offered a proposal here which has some edgy pieces, which actually has some provocative recommendations, but we need to look at these recommendations seriously, much in the same way when we proposed a timeline. A lot of people snapped their necks and said, wait, you can't have a timeline, surrender date and things like this. And I think more and more people are realizing that this is a point where we've got to take control of our national security interests and simply staying the course, or simply making small adjustments in how we train the forces, or simply asking people to come to a table diplomatically is not going to do it. You need a complete package, and I hope you take a look at it. I think you got a copy of the report. I want to just focus on three main points, three grim realities, which I think inform a lot of our analyses and I think help you understand the conclusions that we draw. One, the vast majority of Iraqis see the U.S. military presence as a destabilizing force. They see us as part of the problem, not part of the solution. Second, many of the things that some fear would come to pass if U.S. troops leave have already happened or are happening as we're sitting right here in this room with 170,000 U.S. troops in Iraq. Third, regional diplomacy, which we support. I think the Iraq group, I think Carlos Pascual's recommendations, people on Capitol Hill and especially in the White House need to listen to these recommendations. But the third point is regional diplomacy is not likely to yield tangible results until Iraq's leaders and Iraq's neighbors understand that U.S. troops are leaving Iraq and leaving Iraq in short order. Those are three main points. First, the vast majority of Iraqis see the U.S. military presence as a destabilizing force. I want to talk about a personal story. I went to Iraq for the first time. I lived in the region for about 5 years, and I speak Arabic. I went in 2003. And even at that